My own son is getting married on my vineyard, and I'm not invited. That's what I muttered to myself the moment I saw the guest list. They say legacy is built in the soil, but I never thought mine would be buried in it. When you run a vineyard for 43 years, you stop thinking of it as a business. It becomes breath and blood. The smell of crushed grapes in September, the ache in your back from early frost mornings, the glass of 2013 reserve you pour alone in the kitchen after your husband dies. It becomes your rhythm, your refuge, your cathedral. So imagine standing in the very heart of that land, boots deep in the same dirt you and your late husband once turned with your own hands, as your only son, Nathan, announces to a circle of influencers and marketing reps. We're so excited to be hosting our wedding here. It just fits our aesthetic. Aesthetic. That was the word Jenna used. His fiancée. Blonde, bronzed, her voice all soft power and social capital. She gestured at the rolling hills, the trellised vines, the centuries-old oaks that framed the sky. We want a younger, more modern aesthetic. Think Napa meets Tulum with a touch of Brooklyn industrial. This place is so versatile. This place. Not our place. Not my place. They were planning a wedding on my vineyard with my money, but I wasn't invited. Not really. Not officially. The guest list had been reviewed with the event planner 2 days prior. Jenna did it over FaceTime while I pruned deadwood from the Chardonnay vines. She didn't know I could hear her through the open kitchen window. No, I think Eleanor will just be around, you know? Like background. She doesn't need a seat. Like I was part of the scenery. Like a stone wall or a knotted old olive tree. I laughed when I heard it. Not loudly. Just a single breath out, sharp enough to cut. Nathan didn't correct her. I'd funded their engagement party. Paid off Nathan's business school loans. Covered the new irrigation system last summer, when Jenna wanted to host a wellness retreat with kombucha tastings and moon ceremonies. She called it branding. I called it bullshit. But I held my tongue. Because grief makes you vulnerable to things you would never accept when whole. And after my husband Robert died, Nathan was all I had. Or so I believed. The day they announced the wedding plans, I wore my old straw hat and kept to the tasting room. I poured flights for tourists who asked questions like, "Do you guys grow Cabernet?" while standing 3 feet from a sign that said, "Estate Cabernet Barrel Aged." I smiled. I always smile. The kind of smile you learn to wear like armor. Because women like me, women who build empires out of nothing but sweat and seasons, we're not supposed to show how much it hurts when our sons call us legacy instead of family. Later that evening, Jenna posted an Instagram story from the East Vineyard. Just did our first wedding walkthrough. Can't believe we get to say our vows on this magical land. #GrantLove 2025 #blessed to build. Blessed to build. She didn't build a damn thing. She hadn't watched Robert collapse between barrels in 2004 from a stroke brought on by stress. She hadn't fought the bank for restructuring during the 2008 crash. She hadn't planted new rootstock when phylloxera swept through in 2012. That was me. That was all me. And still I held my tongue. Until the day the official wedding invitation arrived. Creamstock paper. Embossed. Modern minimalist font. Nathaniel Robert Grant and Jenna Louise Rivers request the pleasure of your company. I flipped it over, scanning the list. Tiered seating. Welcome cocktails. Drones. And under the family section, Robert Grant, deceased. No mention of me. My fingers went numb. Not from sadness. From something deeper. Something ancient. Erasure. This was not forgetfulness. It was precision. That night, I opened the cellar and walked the rows of bottles like they were gravestones. Every vintage held a year of my life. The bad ones, the dry ones, the years with wildfires and lawsuits and frost. And the good ones. 2013. The year we won gold in San Francisco. 2014. The last harvest Robert walked with me. 2015. The year I buried him. I pulled out a bottle of the 2013 reserve. Blew the dust from the label. My hand didn't shake. Jenna wanted aesthetics. I was about to give her a show. Not today, but soon. And when I did, no one would forget the name Eleanor Grant ever again. She used to own this place, Jenna said, flicking her fingers toward me like I was a piece of lint. The tasting room had never felt so cold, despite the late spring sun streaming through the windows. Light danced across the polished bar where I'd stood for decades pouring wine for strangers who'd become regulars. The same bar where Robert once kissed the back of my hand after a harvest so brutal we both cried over a bottle of our 2001 Syrah. But now I was just a footnote in my own home. Jenna's voice lifted, bright and polished for the crowd of wedding guests and Instagram micro-celebrities who'd come for the pre-wedding tasting event. She ran the Vineyard years ago. Kept the books. Helped plant things, I think. Helped. Like I was the gardener. Like I hadn't signed every barrel, negotiated every contract, hand-selected every harvest crew. Like my name wasn't branded into the corks for 3 decades. One of the men, some smirking buttoned-up brand rep, laughed as he swirled his glass of the 2017 Merlot. You're so lucky they let you hang around. And I smiled. Because that's what women like me do when we're standing in the ruins of our own empire. We smile. I excused myself politely, gripping the stem of my glass like a weapon I wasn't ready to use yet. I made my way to the back hallway down past the old kitchen, into the storage room no one else had touched in years. The staff called it the vault, mostly because it was where we kept the rare vintages and my husband's old paperwork. The 2013 reserve was tucked neatly on the top shelf, same spot where Robert had stored it after we bottled it. I'd opened that bottle the week before. The one Jenna and Nathan didn't notice was missing. Poured just one glass for me. Sipped it alone in silence, as if to ask it what I should do. It didn't answer. But I already knew. The drawer was where I'd left it. Hidden under an old ledger, its wooden face still sticking slightly from years of humidity. I slid it open, the smell of old paper rising to meet me. Deeds. Trust papers. Contracts. The skeleton of our legacy, all in ink and dust. And I started scanning. One by one. Every document from the Vineyard's founding was still there. Original purchase agreements from 1979. Operating agreements from the early years. Handwritten notes from Robert, his cursive blocky but neat. Marking margins with things like ask accountant and check inheritance clause. And that's where I saw it. A paragraph I hadn't read in years. Maybe decades. A clause Robert had insisted on inserting before he passed, something about brand protection and ownership triggers. I read it again, slowly this time, my eyes tracing every word like they were a map. In the event the Grant family Vineyard brand is commercialized, monetized, or restructured into a media entity, a unanimous vote from all founding parties, Robert and Eleanor Grant, is required. Failure to obtain such approval shall trigger full ownership reversion to the surviving founder. I blinked. Then blinked again. I read it a third time just to be sure. Unanimous approval. Required. And they hadn't asked me. Not once. Not when Jenna launched that influencer wine club and used our logo. Not when Nathan signed off on licensing deals. Not when they posted that reality show teaser. Behind the Vines. A wedding, a vineyard, a legacy in bloom. To Jenna's TikTok with over 2 million views. They hadn't asked. Which meant the clause had triggered. Which meant I owned 100% of this vineyard. Right then. Right there. That very moment. The grin that crept onto my face wasn't warm. It wasn't cold either. It was clean. The kind of grin a lion wears when it's been playing dead too long. I set the papers back into the drawer and pushed it closed with a soft, final sound. The kind of sound doors make when they lock. They didn't know yet. And that was the beautiful part. Let them plan the seating chart. Let them sell their curated story to advertisers. Let them film drone shots of the vines I planted with my bare hands. Let them sip my Merlot and smile for cameras. The more they performed, the better it would taste when the curtain fell. I returned to the tasting room, my smile still perfectly intact. Jenna was mid-story about how they'd flown in a sommelier from Santa Barbara for their rehearsal dinner wines. When she saw me, she tilted her head. "Oh, you're back. Sorry about before. Didn't mean to make you feel weird. It's just, everything's so different now." I just smiled again. "Oh, don't worry, dear," I said sweetly. "I'm just soaking it all in." And I was. Every fake laugh. Every hollow toast. Every guest who treated me like a retired housekeeper who still wandered the halls out of habit. The vault was locked. The scans were safe. And in my bag on a simple USB drive sat every document I'd need. To remind them. Exactly who the hell Eleanor Grant was. The morning after the tasting, I woke at dawn. I always did. Years of vineyard life trained me that way. When the light shifts from black to steel and the leaves hold the last of the night's breath. But this morning was different. This time I wasn't checking on irrigation lines or mildew. I was checking on leverage. I brewed my coffee dark roast, 3 sugars, and opened my laptop at the kitchen table. The USB drive slid in with a soft click. The folder I'd scanned last night opened instantly. There it was. The trust paperwork. The founding clause. The signatures. And the timestamp on the licensing deals Nathan and Jenna had posted online. Wine clubs, branded crates, paid influencer ads. The teaser for their documentary series, that one was gold. Everything was dated, filed, and perfectly aligned. I didn't need a lawyer to tell me what I already knew. But I sent the documents to one anyway. Lena Park. The sharpest estate attorney I'd ever met. She helped Robert and me rewrite the trust in 2003 after a fire nearly bankrupted us. She'd warned us back then. Never assume your heirs will honor your intentions. Put your boundaries in ink. Robert had taken that seriously. Too seriously, maybe. I remember arguing with him over that clause, the ownership reversion trigger, he called it. Said it was there in case Nathan ever sold the soul of the vineyard to a corporation. Turns out he was right. Just didn't expect the corporation to come wrapped in influencer hashtags and bridal lace. By 8:47 a.m. Lena responded, "You were wise to keep this. Based on the documents and timestamps, you have full claim. They violated the trust. You can trigger reversion today." I stared at the screen. For a moment, the kitchen went completely still. No birdsong. No ticking clock. Just that one line echoing in my head. You can trigger reversion today. It felt like finding a loaded weapon hidden in the floorboards of a house someone else had claimed. But I didn't pull the trigger yet. Because first I needed to know how far they'd already gone. I drove down to the Vineyard office, the one they'd renovated last month to look more like a Soho loft than a working winery. Glass walls, bamboo desk, whiteboard filled with social media schedules. It used to smell like paper and wood. Now it smelled like essential oils and expensive candles. Claire, the intern Jenna had hired, looked up from her iPad. "Oh, hi, Mrs. Grant. I'm Eleanor. Jenna's out right now." "Just here to pick something up," I said, smiling. I walked past her into the back office where Nathan's laptop sat open. He'd never been good at passwords. Still used the same one from college, Cabernet 84. The moment I opened his files, I felt it. The quiet panic of a parent realizing just how deep the rot has gone. They hadn't just turned the vineyard into a brand. They'd commodified it. Reality show pitches. Sponsored deals with wineries in Argentina. A wines and wellness retreat package with a yoga influencer. Branded robes. Drone delivery partnerships. They were using my land to build an empire of empty. But it was the emails that turned my breath cold. One thread subject, "Prenup finalized," caught my eye. It was between Jenna and her lawyer. As discussed, all Grant Vineyard proceeds acquired after marriage remain separate property under the Riverside Clause. Full control protected in event of divorce. She wasn't marrying into the vineyard. She was marrying around it. I forwarded the emails to myself. My hand trembled just once. Not with fear, but fury so clean it felt like steel in my spine. Then I closed the laptop and walked out. Claire didn't say a word. She was too busy editing a reel of Jenna's latest Harvest Goddess shoot in a linen jumpsuit she'd never dare wear during an actual harvest. By the time I got back home, Lena had sent another email. "You can proceed quietly or formally. Quiet will give you time to maneuver. Formal will cause immediate disruption. Both options are yours." I chose quiet. For now. Let them keep planning. Let them think the stage was set. I called Nathan later that afternoon, kept my voice gentle. "Sweetheart, I was thinking of clearing out the West Shed this week. Maybe cleaning out some of the older papers." He was distracted, probably scrolling or responding to one of Jenna's brand partner requests. "Yeah, whatever you need, Mom. We're doing a press shoot tomorrow near the tasting barn, FYI. Don't wear that sun hat. Jenna says it messes with the palate." The palate? I almost laughed. Instead I said, "Of course." He hung up without saying goodbye. And that's when I made the decision. Not to punish. Not to destroy. But to remind. Remind them whose name was written into the vines, the soil, the water rights. Remind them who bled for this land, who buried a husband under it, who built it bottle by bottle, root by root. And if I had to become the villain in their love story to protect what Robert and I built, so be it. I poured myself a glass of the 2013. The cork popped like a starting pistol. The sky was unnaturally blue that morning. A filtered, glossy kind of blue. The kind you see on influencer feeds, the kind Jenna probably prayed for every day since she slapped her wedding date across my land like it was a Pinterest board. They were hosting a media event that afternoon. Something called a bridal branding activation. Jenna had sent out glossy digital invitations to press, influencers, and brand partners. The pitch was simple. The Vineyard wasn't just a wedding venue. It was the first step in a lifestyle empire. My legacy, packaged in lavender sprigs and SEO buzzwords. I watched from the porch, a glass of water in my hand, as trucks unloaded folding chairs, grazing tables, and crates of canned rose with Grant vines etched across the label. A name I hadn't signed off on. It was time. I changed into a simple dress. Navy cotton. No frills. No silk. Just enough starch to hold its shape. I wore the gold watch Robert gave me on our 30th anniversary, and pulled my hair back the way he always liked, stern and precise. This wasn't mourning anymore. It was business. By noon, the tasting room had been transformed. White drapes over the windows. A ring light set up in the corner. A backdrop printed with #GrantLove2025, and Jenna X Nathan in calligraphy. There were camera crews, wedding bloggers, even a woman with a headset directing a drone like it was a film shoot. Jenna stood near the center, barefoot in a white silk jumpsuit, holding a flute of champagne for a staged toast. Nathan was beside her, laughing too loudly. He wore a blazer I didn't recognize, probably gifted by one of their sponsors. I walked in through the side door unnoticed, until I didn't want to be. "Jenna," I said. She turned, and the smile froze mid-pose. "Oh, Eleanor. I didn't think you'd be, here. This is still my vineyard," I said, voice calm. "And I thought I'd stop by and offer my congratulations." The cameras turned slightly. No one dared interrupt. I held out a single sheet of paper. She blinked. "What's this?" Nathan walked over, eyebrows knitting. He took the page from her hand and scanned it. His lips moved silently as he read, and then his face changed. Not confusion, not anger, just a slow dawning panic. "This is a sale agreement," he said. "Yes," I said. "I've decided to sell the vineyard." Silence. Even the drone seemed to hover quieter. "I don't understand," Jenna said, her voice pinched. "You never said." "No," I said, cutting her off. "You never asked." I let that sit. 1 beat. 2. Nathan's voice dropped. "To who?" "A buyer out of Sonoma. She's reputable. A woman, actually. Her name isn't Holloway. She respects legacy. And contracts." "But the wedding," Jenna began. "Still a few weeks away," I said. "Technically, you're still on the books. The sale finalizes in 10 days. You'll need to clear the grounds before that." Jenna looked like someone had slapped her. Her eyes darted to the cameras, then back to me. Nathan was pale. "Mom, please. We have people flying in. Sponsors. We already booked." I nodded. "Which is why I'm offering you a choice." Their heads whipped toward me. "I'll allow you to keep the wedding here. No disruption. No cancellation. On one condition." Jenna narrowed her eyes. "What condition?" "I get to give a toast." Nathan blinked. "That's it. One toast," I said. "At the reception. No edits. No review. My vineyard. My words." I watched them both weigh it. I could almost hear Jenna's mind ticking, calculating optics, damage control. Nathan glanced at the cameras, then at her. "Fine," he said. "Deal." Jenna hesitated. Her jaw tightened. But she nodded. "Deal." I smiled. Not a fake smile. Not a background smile. But the kind that feels like a chess piece sliding across the board. Behind me, the drone beeped and ascended again. The woman with the headset stepped forward nervously. "We're going live in 3, 2. Jenna spun on cue, her face radiant. "We're so excited to share this journey," she beamed. "This land means everything to us." I turned and walked out before she could finish the sentence. Outside, the wind shifted just a little. The scent of sage from the back hill rolled down through the rows of Syrah. I stood there under the oak tree Robert planted and whispered out loud, "One toast, my love. And everything changes." A week later, the sky over the vineyard looked like it had been painted, soft clouds drifting over the hills, light catching on every leaf like it had been staged. Perfect. Too perfect. Just how Jenna wanted it. The day of the wedding arrived like a production. Dozens of vendors buzzed across the property. Photographers in black. A coordinator with a clipboard barking last-minute instructions. The gravel paths had been swept. The vines wrapped in string lights. Everything smelled like lavender, dust, and carefully curated money. And there, in the middle of it all, was my vineyard, dressed up like a stranger. The barn had been turned into a reception hall. Draped linen. Floral arches. A 7-tiered cake resting on a barrel I'd made with Robert the year before he died. Jenna's initials were etched into it in gold leaf. They hadn't asked. The ceremony was scheduled for 5:15, to catch golden hour. As the drone operator explained to a wedding blogger, there were nearly 200 guests, mostly influencers, PR reps, and brand partners. I counted less than 10 people who had dirt under their fingernails. Nathan stood by the arch in a beige linen suit. His smile was tight. He scanned the crowd more than once like he was hoping to see me, or terrified that he would. I didn't sit in the crowd. I stood in the shade near the eastern trellis behind the wine cart. No one noticed. Or if they did, they didn't say a word. To them, I was just a figure in the background. As planned, the music started. A slowed acoustic version of something Jenna said was meaningful, though I couldn't place the lyrics. The crowd turned, and Jenna appeared. Her gown was white lace, custom of course. Hand-beaded. Probably flown in from somewhere that didn't have dust or sweat. She walked slowly, milking every step, eyes trained on the drone buzzing overhead. Cameras flashed. People sighed. She reached Nathan and grabbed both his hands. The officiant, a friend from Jenna's wellness retreat circle, began. Words were said. Vows were exchanged. I didn't hear most of it, because I was remembering my own wedding. Robert's voice. The way he looked at me like the rest of the world didn't exist. We didn't have photographers or drones. Just a judge, a borrowed suit, and 2 witnesses who showed up late and left early. But we had the land. We had each other. Jenna and Nathan kissed. The crowd clapped. The drone pulled back in a wide arc, capturing the kiss from above like a movie finale. And then the reception. It moved quickly. Aperitifs. Dancing. Speeches. Nathan's was short. Awkward. A thank you to Jenna's family, to sponsors, to everyone who made this day the launch of something new. He didn't mention me. And that was fine. Because the mic was passed to Jenna. And then to me. The crowd didn't quite know how to react as I walked to the front. Some clapped. Some stared. One woman in sunglasses whispered, "Who is that?" Jenna forced a smile. Nathan wouldn't meet my eyes. I took the mic, smiled, and began. "Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, and I imagine that's most of you, my name is Eleanor Grant. For the past 43 years, I've owned and operated this vineyard." A few nods. Some polite applause. I held the pause just long enough. Today is a beautiful day. Not just because of the wedding, though it is beautiful, but because it marks something more. I scanned the room. I could see Nathan's brow tighten. This land holds our roots and our truth. It's not just soil and grapes. It's history. It's heartbreak. It's triumph. This vineyard was not built with hashtags. It was built with calloused hands and sleepless nights. With love. With loss. Silence. Jenna's smile was frozen. Nathan stepped forward slightly, unsure whether to stop me. I kept going. And today, as you step into marriage, I want to offer you not just a toast but a reflection. Because today is not just the beginning of your marriage. I turned to Nathan. It's the end of mine. To illusions. Gasps. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw wine or storm off. I simply raised my glass. To the future, I said. To honesty. To remembering the roots beneath the show. I drank. One sip. Then walked away before they could recover. Behind me, the guests murmured. Someone clapped. Someone else whispered. That was intense. Jenna looked at Nathan like she had just discovered a loose thread in her wedding gown. And Nathan? He was watching me with the expression of a man realizing he'd slept through the fire alarm. Good. Because the fire was already lit. And the smoke would rise by morning. At 2:03 a.m. I pressed post. The vineyard was silent. The guests were asleep, drunk or disoriented in the guests' cottages. The arch still stood in the east field, lit only by moonlight. Jenna's bouquet had wilted on a wine barrel. The cake was half-eaten, flies buzzing low. And the story I had been writing for weeks, quietly, ruthlessly, was now public. It started with a pre-recorded video. For minutes. Shot in the tasting room 2 days before the wedding. Me standing behind the bar, speaking into the camera with the same calm I'd used to explain a wine flight to a tourist from Michigan. No anger. No tears. Just the truth. The video opened like this. My name is Eleanor Grant. For 43 years I built this vineyard from nothing. My late husband and I poured every season of our lives into this soil. But this week my name disappeared from the guest list, from the story, from the land. They tried to erase me. But they forgot something. I never left. I laid out the truth piece by piece. How Nathan and Jenna commercialized the vineyard without my consent. How that violated a founding trust clause, a clause written by my husband to protect the legacy from exactly this kind of exploitation. I showed the contracts, the date-stamped social media campaigns, the licensing deals, the email Jenna's lawyer sent about her prenup, the one where she ensured full ownership of vineyard profits in the event of divorce. Then came the audio. A quiet recording, one I captured during the tasting event. Jenna laughing to her bridesmaid. Eleanor's basically a prop at this point. Our vineyard mummy. Good for brand authenticity though. And finally the closer. By law, I now own 100% of this vineyard. I don't want revenge. I want recognition. This is not a brand. It is a legacy. And I will not be erased. I didn't post it to just one platform. I posted it everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, even TikTok, though I had to ask Lena's assistant how to format it. And I sent a direct message to Jenna's biggest brand sponsor, a wellness drink company whose entire aesthetic was built on female empowerment and authentic storytelling. Then I turned off my phone and went to sleep. I woke at 7:11 a.m. to 213 missed notifications. By 7:34 my email had crashed. By 8:02 there were reporters calling the vineyard office. I dressed slow, purposeful, cotton slacks, a denim button-up, the same belt Robert used to wear during harvest. I made tea, not coffee. Coffee felt too frantic. Nathan showed up at 8:46. He didn't knock. Just stormed through the tasting room doors, tie loose, eyes wild. What the hell did you do? I didn't flinch. I told the truth. You ruined everything, he snapped. Jenna's crying. Her publicist is threatening to sue. The wedding footage is being pulled. The sponsors have ethics, I said. Apparently more than you. He slammed his hand on the counter. Do you know what you've cost us? Cost you? I repeated. No, Nathan. What you cost me was my name. You turned my life into a backdrop. He blinked. And for the first time in years he looked like the boy I raised, not the man who tried to replace me with branding. He sat down. Hard. Like the weight of it all finally hit. She said this was good for us, he whispered. That we were elevating the vineyard. You tried to turn my grief into a marketing asset, I said. You let her stand on the bones of what your father and I built. And you called it elevation. Outside a car door slammed. Then another. Reporters. Jenna's manager. A photographer. The vultures had arrived. I stood, took my keys and walked to the door. I'm heading into town, I said. The vineyard is closed until further notice. Let them wait. Nathan looked up, broken. What happens now? I paused at the doorway. That depends, I said. Do you want to be my son again? Or Jenna's brand partner? He didn't answer. So I left him there, surrounded by roses and rented chairs, while the press circled like bees without a queen. The internet did the rest. My video hit 1 million views by midnight. Jenna's sponsors pulled out. The Grant Love reality show deal collapsed. A PR firm released a statement distancing themselves from unauthorized commercial misuse of generational land. People weren't just watching. They were siding with me. The comments poured in. She built that vineyard. Not them. Imagine erasing your own mother. This is what legacy looks like. I'm buying every bottle she's ever made. By the end of the week, Jenna's face was no longer on a single piece of Vineyard branding. But mine? Mine was on the front page of Wine and Legacy Quarterly. Captioned simply, "The Matriarch Returns." It didn't take long for the empire to crumble. 3 days after the video, Jenna's face vanished from every campaign. The wellness tonic company released a statement. "We regret our association with individuals who misrepresented their connection to family-owned land." The irony was rich. They'd banked on rustic charm and authentic legacy. Now the matriarch they ignored was front-page material. Jenna tried to spin it. She posted a tearful apology from the guesthouse balcony. All puffy eyes and white bathrobe. "We deeply respect Eleanor Grant and never meant to exclude her. Miscommunications happen. This is a journey of healing." She turned off the comments. Which was smart. Because they were brutal. You called her a mummy. Miscommunication? You erased her from her own wedding. This is what happens when you treat your future mother-in-law like set dressing. Her followers dropped. Brands quietly removed tags. Even her skincare line halted its influencer program. Until further clarity, they said. Nathan stayed quiet. I knew that silence. It was the same silence he used as a child when he broke something and hoped if he looked away long enough, it would fix itself. But some cracks are loud. Lena called me on the 5th day after the post. "You need to see something." She sent me a link. A court document. Filed in Los Angeles 2 months before the wedding. Rivers v. Grant, petition for separate property confirmation, marital assets. In short, Jenna had filed for legal confirmation that any revenue tied to Grant Vines after the wedding belonged solely to her. She filed it before the wedding, before the vows, before the smiles, before the toast. She was never marrying into the vineyard. She was marrying Nathan around it. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just closed the tab and whispered, "Robert, you were right to be cautious." Later that night, I stood by the cellar door, sipping the 2017 Syrah. Tasted like pepper and betrayal. At 11:12 p.m., Nathan knocked on my kitchen door. I let him in. He looked thinner. Ashy. Like he hadn't slept since the video dropped. "She's gone," he said, voice hollow. "Packed her things. Left a note." I waited. She said the story shifted. Said she can't be the face of something she doesn't control. I raised an eyebrow. "You thought she loved the land?" He didn't answer. Instead, he slumped into a chair and put his head in his hands. I don't even know if she ever loved me. That I believed. I poured him tea. Not wine. He wasn't ready to taste this land again. "She saw you as a brand extension," I said softly. "Not a partner. Not a son. A stepping stone." He looked up. "I let her do it," he said. "I let her erase you." I nodded. "You did." Silence stretched. Long and uncomfortable. "But you were willing to lose this vineyard," I said. "Lose me? For what?" He didn't have an answer. That was the worst part. The press ate it up. Jenna's downfall trended under #VineyardScandal and #matriarchmove. I had interview requests from legacy publications. One magazine offered a photo shoot. I declined. Let the story be about the vineyard, not the face. The documentary she pitched, the one she said would launch the Grant Love brand, was officially dropped. The production company emailed me, asking for permission to use old vineyard footage. I replied with one word. No. But it was the prenup that truly split Nathan open. Once the dust settled, I sat him down and showed him the documents I'd forwarded to myself. Her lawyer's emails. The clauses she insisted on. The Riverside addendum. She gets everything in the divorce except the vineyard, I explained. Because of me. His face twisted. Like the truth was acid in his throat. She planned it all, he whispered. I didn't say yes. I didn't need to. She'd only needed one thing from him, the brand. and when it slipped out of her hands, she let him fall with it. She took the engagement gifts, the influencer deals, the press coverage, but not the dirt, not the roots. She left those behind, too messy, too real. The day after she left, a delivery arrived at the front gate. It was a custom-framed photo of her and Nathan under the wedding arch, smiling, sunlit, perfect. I took one look and tossed it in the compost, where it belonged. The guest house still smelled like her bergamot, rosewater, and something artificial trying too hard to feel natural. The windows were open, gauze curtains billowing just enough to flutter a silk robe left behind on a chaise lounge. Her name was embroidered in gold thread across the chest. Jenna Rivers Grant. I held it for a moment, thumb grazing the stitching, then dropped it in the donations box with the rest of her carefully curated existence. She was gone, but her fingerprints lingered on every surface: curated coffee table books, a diffuser labeled Forest Mindfulness, and a stack of signed influencer contracts tucked between fashion magazines and unpaid invoices. This room was never meant to be hers. Robert and I built it as a place for friends, for visiting vintners, for family. Not for branding. The eviction notice was simple. 1 page. No dramatics. Just the truth, signed and notarized. 72-hour legal notice to vacate Grant Estate main residence. I had Lena courier it the next morning, sealed in cream stock paper Jenna would have approved of. Nathan found it first. He stormed into the main house by late afternoon, cheeks flushed and shirt wrinkled, the uniform of a man whose world was shrinking faster than he could explain it. "You're evicting me?" he said, voice cracking at the edge. "No," I replied calmly. "I'm reassigning the property. The guest house was never meant for long-term residents, especially not for tenants who treated it like a studio set." He held up the paper like it might change if he stared hard enough. This says we have 3 days. "That's generous," I said. "Legally, I could demand you vacate immediately." "Where the hell are we supposed to go?" he snapped. "You'll figure it out," I said. "You're smart. You've always been resourceful, when it benefited you." He paced like a caged animal, running a hand through his hair. "This is insane." "No," I corrected. "This is consequence. You're seriously throwing your own son out?" "I'm reclaiming my home. You turned it into a billboard. You stood by while your wife erased me from the guest list of a wedding I funded, on land I still legally own. You didn't speak up once." Nathan's jaw clenched. "I didn't know what she was doing." "You didn't want to know," I snapped. "You liked the comfort, the optics, the sponsorships. You let her turn our history into a launchpad for her brand." He sat down on the old piano bench like his knees had given out. "She's gone, Mom." I said nothing. "She packed everything. Left a note on the mirror. The story shifted," she wrote. "What the hell does that even mean?" "It means," I said gently, "you stopped being useful to her." His head dropped into his hands. I let him sit there. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. "I thought I was building something with her." "You were," I said. "Just not what you thought." Silence stretched between us like a fault line. He looked up. "So what now? You just cut me off?" "No," I said. "You're still my son. But being my son doesn't entitle you to free land and immunity from consequence." He stared out the window past the Syrah Rose. "What are you going to do with the guest house?" he asked. I turned the envelope over in my hands. "I'm converting it," I said, "into a writer's cabin. A place for women over 50, widows, survivors, those who've lost husbands, homes, voices." He turned back to me slowly. "You're serious?" I nodded. "They'll come here for residencies, drink the wine they helped harvest, write about the lives they've rebuilt." "And where do I go?" I looked at him, really looked. The dark circles, the lost boy beneath the branded shell. "That's up to you." He didn't argue. Not again. He left quietly that night, headlights cutting across the vineyard like a wound. He didn't say goodbye, and I didn't stop him. I stood on the porch until the sound of his engine disappeared. Then I went to the guest house and opened every window. I lit a candle, cedar and sage, something grounded. I stripped the bed, removed the faux fur throw, unplugged the diffuser. The place breathed again. freer with each discarded remnant of her curated lie. I sat at the oak desk, the one she'd once said was too heavy for modern taste, and opened a fresh notebook. On the first page I wrote, "Welcome to Widow's Row," and beneath it, "Aged by betrayal, bottled in fire." I closed the book, and for the first time in months I felt peace. They expected a sale. Whispers had already started. That I'd lost my patience, that I was too old to run the vineyard alone, that I'd finally cave and sell to one of the luxury developers sniffing around the valley for years. But they misunderstood me. Revenge wasn't the end of this story. It was the beginning. 1 month after Nathan left, I called a meeting in the old barn. The very one where Jenna staged her lavender-scented wedding dinner under Edison bulbs and curated string quartets. I cleared the place out. No flowers, no centerpieces, no pretension. Just long wooden tables, honest light, and a picture of our 2013 reserve on every surface. They came from everywhere. 12 women, all over 50. One had lost her husband to cancer after 30 years. One had been quietly pushed out of her own restaurant by her son's new wife. Another had just finalized a divorce from a man who married her for a green card and left her for a girl he met at a yoga retreat. Some were writers. Some were farmers. One had spent 20 years caring for a husband with dementia and now couldn't remember who she was before him. But they all had one thing in common. They'd been erased, discarded, silenced. Until now. I poured wine. I told them my story, not the viral video version but the real one. The version with dirt under its nails and disappointment braided into every harvest. They listened. Then one by one they told theirs. We cried. Then laughed. Then drank again. And I made them an offer. Not charity. Not a retreat. Not therapy wrapped in vineyard aesthetics. I offered them shares. Ownership. Legacy. I'm not selling to a developer, I told them. I'm turning the vineyard into a collective. You won't just live here. You'll build here. Harvest. Blend. Bottle. Profit. One of them, Rosa, a retired professor with wine-stained fingers and the posture of a tree, asked the question they were all thinking. But why us? I didn't hesitate. Because we've all lived lives where our names were put second. Because we know how to endure. And because you don't need to be 25 and camera ready to make something sacred. And that was the start of it. Widow's Row. Each woman invested what she could. Some with money. Some with labor. Some with stories that became the heartbeat of our label. The name came naturally. A tribute, a warning, a brand with teeth. The label design was simple. Black glass, silver ink script, and a tag hanging from the neck of every bottle. Aged by betrayal. Bottled in fire. We didn't make a press announcement. We didn't hire PR. We told the truth. And it traveled. A journalist from Legacy Vine caught wind of it and showed up uninvited. Instead of turning her away, we poured her a glass and let her work the fields with us for a week. She wrote a piece titled "The Women Who Refused to Age Quietly." It went viral. Our first release sold out in 9 hours. The second had a waiting list 3,000 names long. They called it a rebellion. We called it Tuesday. Meanwhile, the developers kept calling, offering blank checks. One of them even sent a gift basket with a note that read, "Every woman deserves a soft landing. Let us help." I sent the basket back with a copy of our shareholder agreement. We weren't soft. We were steel wrapped in velvet. We still wore gloves when pruning. Still ended harvest days with blistered hands and aching backs. But our laughter was louder. Our joy more feral. And when we drank our own wine, it tasted like something real. Like something earned. One afternoon, Rosa handed me a sketch she'd drawn. It was a woman, aged, sharp-eyed, standing among vines. Her back was straight, her hand on a glass, her smile unreadable. "Who is she?" I asked. "You," Rosa said. "And all of us." We made it the centerpiece of our tasting room. Nathan called once. I let it ring. Then sent a text. "The vineyard's not for sale. But you're welcome to volunteer at harvest." He didn't reply. But he didn't call again either. That night, I stood on the porch with a glass of Widow's Row Reserve. The moon hung low, heavy with promise. The vines whispered in the wind. Not of endings but of roots growing deeper. I didn't just win. I planted something new. 1 year later, the vineyard looked different. Not flashier. No neon signage or fluorescent signage. Not slicker. If anything, it had grown quieter. More deliberate. The kind of quiet that only comes after a storm has passed and something stronger takes root. We didn't host influencers now. We hosted women. Journalists. Widows. Storytellers. Gardeners who had once managed estates they didn't own. Teachers with manuscripts in their drawers. Women who had raised empires through casseroles and compromise, and now stood tall among vines that knew what it meant to survive. I wore boots caked in real soil, not curated for brand shoots, but broken in by the field. And that morning I led a tour. Not for sponsors. Not for developers. For truth-tellers. The journalists arrived just after sunrise. 3 of them, one from Modern Wine Culture, one from Heritage Estates Quarterly, and one young writer who published essays about legacy and matriarchy online. She was the only one who didn't carry a press badge. I liked her immediately. "This way," I said, leading them down the main path through the Syrah rows. The air was thick with harvest energy, early crush season. You could smell the sugars rising, the tension in the leaves. The women working the rows nodded as we passed. Some waved. One of them, Deborah, a former attorney, had an old radio strapped to her waist playing Billie Holiday. "Has the vineyard changed much?" the Heritage Estates reporter asked, squinting toward the barn. I smiled. "It's changed on paper. But the soil knows who it belongs to." We passed the old barn Jenna had once used as a backdrop for her bridal branding. Now it was a fermentation center and community kitchen. The chalkboard menu for lunch read, rosemary focaccia, grilled pears, Syrah glazed lamb, Widow's Row Zinfandel pairing. The journalists scribbled notes. "You named it Widow's Row," the younger writer said. "Why?" I paused beside a barrel resting in the shade. "Because widowhood doesn't just come from death," I said. "Sometimes it comes from being left behind, from being silenced, from watching your legacy repackaged without your permission." They went quiet. We rounded the path toward the old tasting room, the one where Jenna once called me, the woman who used to own this place. It had been redesigned now. Warmer. Simpler. A long table stood in the center, with mismatched chairs and harvest tools hanging along the walls like relics of sacred labor. But the newest addition was a plaque above the entrance. The young writer stopped in front of it and read aloud. In memory of the woman they thought would stay silent. "That's you," she said. I didn't answer, because it wasn't just me anymore. Inside, Rosa was giving a blending workshop. Her voice carried over the open doors, steady and sure. The women around her were laughing, swirling glasses, scribbling notes. They weren't tourists. They were architects of something sacred. And this time they weren't asking for permission. We walked further, past the edge of the vineyard, where the hills dipped toward the reservoir. A new structure had been built there. A small chapel-shaped greenhouse, where grief was composted into poetry. Inside it, journals lined the shelves. Essays, prayers, rage, joy, vows made to oneself. "Is this part of the brand too?" one of the journalists asked. "No," I said. "This part's for us." The tour ended back at the porch of the main house. The younger writer hesitated before leaving. "Do you miss him?" she asked. "Your son." I looked toward the road, quiet now except for the wind. "He still lives nearby," I said. "Just not in my story anymore." She nodded, as if she understood something not yet written, then asked the final question. "What would you say to the woman you were a year ago?" I smiled. It wasn't bitter. Not soft either. Just real. I'd tell her to stop waiting for the apology, to stop shrinking just to stay palatable, to remember that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is remove yourself from the hands that mishandled you. The writer scribbled that down, then stopped. "Do you ever worry they'll come back?" she asked. I walked to the edge of the porch, where the vines shimmered in the light. "They always do," I said. "But I don't live for their return. I live for the harvest. For the women who arrive with stories buried in their throats and leave with their names in ink. For the laughter that rings louder than any applause. For the bottles we cork with our own hands. And for the fire we've learned to carry without burning ourselves." Widow's Row didn't just survive. We grew. And this time no one's cutting us out of the frame.